Finance Minister of India, Mr. Arun Jaitley. Mr. Jaitley, I've interacted with several investors in the last 2 days, and all of them are extremely excited about the tax regime and what the current administration is doing. However, there seems to be a niggling worry about what is happening in the world, especially in the light of the way US Fed is reading the world.
Well, it's obvious that there will be concerns of this kind because you have global challenges. You have a challenge of the global economy having slowed down a little. You have challenges with regard to the uncertainty over the interest rates in US. You have challenges about what's happened recently in China. But then our effort has to be, as far as India is concerned, to make India, to the extent it is possible, resilient to these kind of challenges. And therefore, that can only happen if our economy is on very sound footing. And therefore, the concentration on the real economy and the parameters of that real economy. That's what we are trying to do.
You always maintain that rupee has to be a currency which is determined by market forces. Reserve Bank of India should not intervene. But at a time globally when every central bank or banker, they want their currency to remain weak so that they can gain export edge. What should RBI do? How should you do the balancing act?
Well, I think the RBI knows the range in which the rupee functions. And therefore, the RBI can't really interfere on a day-to-day basis as far as the rupee is concerned. As long as it is range-bound, I think that's a fair situation. And the RBI has been handling that situation.
The other obvious question has to be about rate cut. And now that inflation has got crushed, globally commodity prices have come down. Is there need of the hour not for 25 but for at least 50 bips now?
Well, that's a decision the Reserve Bank will have to take. And I think when the Reserve Bank, as of today, has the full authority to decide this, we must learn to trust the Reserve Bank. And therefore, the bank has a history of being a very professional institution which factors in all these concerns. Everybody would like a rate cut. But the fact is that the authority to do it is the Reserve Bank. And I'm sure that they are conscious of the situation.
One concern about India seems to be that even though government spending has gone up in key sectors like railways, infrastructure, the investment cycle really has not picked up. The core data is not really indicating that the acceleration in the economy is there.
Public spending has increased, FDI has increased, private domestic investment has to increase. And therefore, the last few years have resulted in a lot of stress on the private sector itself. And I'm sure when a combination of FDI and public investment pushes the investment cycle up, performance parameters of private sector are also going to improve.
GST is the other common question I'm sure you will be asked here in Singapore and again in Hong Kong. If GST sails through on the floor of Parliament in December, are you confident of rolling it out?
No, I'm certainly confident of rolling it out. Depending on when GST gets cleared by Parliament, we'll have to determine the date. And you must always bear in mind that GST is not a tax which has to be introduced only on the 1st of April or not at all. It's a tax which can be introduced on any day.
So how much could be the time gap between once it's cleared on the floor of the Parliament versus the actual implementation?
You see, after it's cleared by the Rajya Sabha, it has to be cleared by 50% of the states, which I don't see much of a difficulty. Then there have to be 3 supporting legislations, 2 of which have to be passed by Parliament. But those legislations only require a lower house approval. So that should not be much of a difficulty. And then the states have to pass their own state GST laws.
Are you worried about NPAs in the PSU banks? I know some measures have been taken. Some of them are cultural measures which you've announced in the Indradhanush scheme. But banks have a large lending issue. The culture is a problem and the exposure to steal.
I think most important, the sectors which have resulted in the NPAs have to be addressed. And now we are also separately addressing each one of those sectors.
What would be your broad pitch to institutional investors you would be interacting with?
I think India needs a lot of investment, and India is one of the best investment destinations. That's the approach we have at the moment.
Are you excited about what is happening to financial savings? The Indian average investor is back. Mutual funds are now getting inflows on a daily basis. This time, even though foreigners were selling, domestic investors were buying. I mean, that's very, very heartening.
Well, even in the PSU disinvestments which we've had in the last 1.25 year, the private investors have broadly come in a big way. And therefore, that activity again is starting in the market.
I'll just ask you one closing question, Mr. Jaitley. And the concerns raised by some macroeconomists are that will you struggle to meet your disinvestment target given what has happened to the markets? For disinvestment to sail through, market conditions have to be benign.
Well, market conditions are certainly very difficult. And therefore, in the midst of these difficult circumstances, to manage that target is our eventual goal. Now, we have a number of PSU stocks. We are still in the first half of the year. And therefore, let us try and proceed as much as we can do.
So the concern is bunching up could happen in the second half?
Well, it depends on how the market operates.
But if markets are not stable, then how will you reach your number?
I don't want to speculate on hypothetical situations.
General, last question. If you have to make India pitch which is different from the previous regime, how would you say that this time it's really different?
It's different because a lot of different things are happening. Earlier, nothing was happening.
Some would also argue that the current administration has been outright lucky because oil prices have collapsed.
Well, then I think it's a combination of several circumstances. It has also been very decisive.
Mr. Jaitley, really good talking to you. Good luck and thank you for joining us.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.